Today, we give the welcome of Oscar Lopez Rivera, who is a legacy here in this community, who in 1967, after his tour in Vietnam, came back and became an activist to fight for Puerto Rican civil rights and other situations that we've confronted. He became active in the housing program, he became in educational programs. Eventually, he is also the founder of Pedro Albizu Campos High School, the vision of the Puerto Rican Culture Center, which 45 years later is still very, very active. We have a school that we started with 5 people. Today we have a high school that's called Dr. Pedro Albizu Campos that has 200 students. 89 will be graduating today, will be the guard, the honor guard for him when he enters La Casita de Don Pedro. And so today we welcome that legacy and to thank him and also to recognize the work that he has done during this time, during the time that he came in 1967 to today. It marks 50 years of the work that has done. And today, after 50 years and 35 years of incarceration, he will be able to see firsthand the legacy that he had left and how it has developed. We are part of the Puerto Rican independence movement because Puerto Rico is a colony of the United States. Colonialism is an international crime against humanity. We have the right to have an independent nation, and that's what we fought for. We were charged with seditious conspiracy, which is an illegal because Puerto Rico is not part of the United States. It belongs to, but it's not part of the United States, and therefore we set a right. Just as right now, Puerto Rico is in mourning of the junta that's been imposed to Puerto Rico by the United States, and in mourning of the colonial status. And today we're going to reaffirm that dedication that we will have a free and an independent Puerto Rico.
I'm extremely ecstatic, very emotional. I used to work for the Puerto Rican Cultural Center, so Jose Lopez, Oscar's brother, is my former boss and a good friend of mine. And so, again, this is very close to home for me. The ties to the community have been here since before Oscar was arrested, and even while he was detained, his brother has maintained strong ties with providing social services to the youth, homeless youth, HIV positive youth. There's a lot of services. There's a GED program at Dr. Albizu Campos High School for alternative kids who have problems with their school, whether it's gang problems bothering them or family problems. Some of them, are in foster care, that sort of thing. And it's a really, really good thing that he's been doing here for longer than I can remember. So I really don't know what else to say other than I'm extremely proud to be a Puerto Rican American, and I actually left work early. I work in Oak Brook, and I left work early to get here. So here I am.
When we look at United States and what they have done around the world, they call themselves the champions of human rights, but unfortunately we know that they are one of the biggest violators of human rights, because if that was the case, they wouldn't have a colonial possession in their hands. The whole thing of, if you look at the history of United States of supporting apartheid for many years, for decades and decades, of course that shows that they have no respect for people of color. When this nation also enslaved by shadow slavery the African Americans in this country. So they have a legacy of violating human rights, and the world has now come to terms that they have been violating human rights. Today, Puerto Ricans have acknowledged in Puerto Rico that the status that they lived, the so-called Commonwealth or Estado Libre Asociado, was a false, that it was not real, that there's no Estado Libre Asociado, because the Supreme Court in 2016 declared that Puerto Rico is a colony. Therefore, it legitimizes our struggle for a free and independent Puerto Rico and to decolonize Puerto Rico, and also and for the junta for it to be dropped, to be not function, because they control the livelihood of the Puerto Rican nation. When you have a nation that a gallon of milk costs $5.99, eggs cost $4.99, and then you pay them $4.25, and you wouldn't even give them medical services. The schools are being closed, all because of the bill that was being imposed on Puerto Rico, a debt that is not even our debt. How can we control and how can we change something that we don't control? Puerto Ricans are not able even to trade with any country but the United States. And our port, the port that belongs to the Puerto Rican nation, the profits of that port is taken by United States because they took it from us in 1917 illegally. So therefore, return back our port, let us trade, and let us run our nation.
I'm here today to celebrate the release of Oscar Lopez. Now that we have within our gathering here today, I've been on this struggle for the last 20 years. I feel emotional right now because as I used to go visit some of the other prisoners in Pennsylvania, 5 hours that way, 5 back. So these 5 hours that it took me from Cleveland, Ohio to here, it's not that much of a struggle, not much effort. I had done a lot of more effort, and they're waiting for 20 years. This ain't nothing, okay? So I brought my wife with me so she put up with some of my being here, being there, and she also was with me when Oscar was in solitary confinement, and this was so awful that a human being, you don't do that to an animal, let alone to a human being. I used to write to Oscar, and some of his drawings are dressing the walls in my living room, my house, I should say. And there was some time about 4 or 5 years ago, I was stopped writing. I stopped receiving letters from him because the Bureau of Prison stopped him. My letters getting to him, okay, or they was vice versa, in such a repressive manner that, the government of the United States do against political prisoners. We need to be more outspoken because this abuse has got to be stopped worldwide.
Today is a day of happiness. Finally, 36 years, we've been fighting and fighting to bring Oscar home. Oscar is the patriot. He's our hero. He's our hero.
How do you feel?
I am very happy that finally we have Oscar home. Oscar has spent too much time in jail. It was too long. He should have been home a long time ago. I am elated to have him coming home today. I was able to see Oscar step out to his freedom yesterday. I was in Puerto Rico in the morning. I was there in the morning. I was one of the lucky ones that got to visit with him. But yesterday morning, I was there when he stepped out. And that was the most beautiful day I have experienced in a long time. Oscar is very strong, and he has proved it for the last 36 years. So when he walked out of there, you cannot even tell that Oscar was in jail for 36 years with the beautiful smile on his face, the peaceful face that he had.
I met Oscar Lopez Rivera in the year at the age of 15 and a half. While I was in high school, and I was developing a housing program that I was investigating. And I went to see him, and from there on, we developed a relationship to work in the community against housing, for better housing, for education. I became one of the student founders of the Puerto Rican High School, what today is called Dr. Pedro Alviso Campos. And since that time, we have had a relationship of a struggle here in this community. And always remember that when you talk about the Puerto Rican nation, you have to come back to the 1950s when we first came here. My parents came here in 1953. It was the first time that they came here, and the only place that we could live was in African-American neighborhoods. Therefore, within time, we started to develop here in Humboldt Park, in subhuman conditions of the housing that were being, where slumlords were rent to us. Eventually, we fought for better housing, for better education, and for us to be recognized and be treated humanely. And since that time, I have dedicated myself for the betterment of not only the Puerto Rican nation, but all oppressed people. We work in solidarity with African Americans. We work in solidarity with the Mexican nation and for immigration reforms, because we have solidarized ourselves not only just for Puerto Ricans, but all oppressed people and people who defend human rights. And that's a legacy that the Puerto Rican culture has had and that we continue to have to this day.
Yeah, I've been involved in the campaign to free Oscar Lopez Rivera for the past 20 years. He was in prison for 36 years. For us in Puerto Rico and here in Chicago, he became a symbol of our resistance and our freedom, and actually we likened him to the example of Nelson Mandela. And so this day is a day that it's a mixed day. We saw it coming, but also we're afraid we would never see it. And so to know that he is free among us and is able to be free and go back to his political activities is really an amazing experience. Often when racism is discussed, particularly in the United States, it's often discussed in terms of black and white terms. Often the Puerto Rican colonial issue is not discussed and not brought into the picture. For us, the colonial situation in Puerto Rico is very similar to apartheid in South Africa. And it's interesting that most Americans do not know anything about the colonial nature of Puerto Rico or everything that Puerto Rico goes through. And so often Puerto Ricans on the island and here in the United States are treated as second and third class citizens. We receive worse services. Our island is not only being used for its natural resources, but there is a massive migration going on now because of the economic crisis. But then you see a massive immigration there of wealthy whites who are gentrifying the island. And so Puerto Rico is basically a microcosm of all of the racism that we tend to experience here in the United States. There's a media blackout when it comes to any issues on the island. And that's why most Americans here are not even aware of what's going on. I would argue that if those issues were brought to light in the United States, I do think that the average American citizen would express outrage. So we believe that the media blackout is done on purpose to sort of create a shrouded secrecy in Puerto Rico so that the activities there could continue to happen.
One more quick question. Can you describe your feelings of this day, this special day?
So when we heard that he was being released back when Obama announced the clemencies, I immediately burst into tears. I was afraid we would never see this day. I was afraid that Obama would not grant clemency, and then we would have someone like Trump in office, and that Oscar would die in prison. And so to have him free, I can't even explain it. I'm so excited to be able to see him. I've never met him. I've never talked to him in person. I've only talked to him on the phone. And so this is an incredible day for our community.
cariño, mucho amor para todos ustedes, para todas ustedes. Después de 35 años y meses de estar preso, quiero que sepan que nunca perdí mis esperanzas de estar aquí con ustedes. De estar en esta calle Division, de estar en el parque Humboldt Park, de estar viendo estas caras jóvenes bonitas, ver a todas estas personas que están aquí. Y yo les puedo garantizar algo, en este corazón boricua hay mucho amor para aquí, para la diáspora puertorriqueña, donde quiera que esté, y para Puerto Rico. Mi misión en este mundo, hasta que muera, es luchar por la descolonización de Puerto Rico. ¡Que viva Puerto Rico libre! Quiero que sepan todos que las luchas se hacen con amor. Y para triunfar como puertorriqueños, necesitamos ese amor a la patria. El que ama la patria, lucha por la patria. Eso. Así que con eso los dejo. Mucho amor para todos. Gracias.
Right here.
Back up. Ready?
Cada día sufriendo
Give us some room, sir. Come on, let's go. Guys, back up. Back up, please. Give us some room.
Gotta back up. Back up. Gotta back up.
Para que